just gave a statement in the House a couple of hours ago about how the citizens of my riding, Calgary, Midnapore, are suffering as a result of 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. I mentioned such tragic things of young adults not being able to have the children that they had dreamed of having as a result of economic circumstances. I talked about parents having to pull kids out of organized sports. And as a hockey mother, I can certainly tell you, Madam President, that it is not a cheap endeavor to do any form of organized sports in this day and age. And as well, seniors who are so embarrassed, who have committed so much to this country, contributed so much to this country, who now have to rely on food banks, as do over 2 million Canadians, Madam Speaker. So in my time, I would like to share a few more of these heartbreaking stories from my riding, explain a little bit why this is happening at this time after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, and finally suggest a small step, a solution that we are providing for this House to consider, and I hope vote in favour of come this Monday. Madam Speaker, as I indicated, I am just hearing tragic story after tragic story out of my riding, and it's no surprise to me considering that Albertans pay an average of $2,943 per year for this carbon tax. Madam Speaker, I'll start with this very sad email from Belinda. Belinda in my riding writes, "Please help Canadians. My husband works a job downtown, and I work. We have 3 teenagers at a local high school. We are college educated and can't afford anything beside necessities. I've never written to an MP, but I feel like our whole community is desperate. Mental health is being affected. We no longer have the funds to do anything fun. We have to rip our kids out of sports next year." A heartbreaking proposition for a parent, I'm sure, Madam Speaker. "And it's killing me inside," Belinda writes. "Help us, please, to have it changed." I received another email, Madam Speaker, from Jacob. Jacob writes to me from my riding, "I'm reaching out to express the general sense of dread associated with my family's future. We are living in a time where we are experiencing the highest prices on every non-discretionary item on our budget. From the gas pump to the grocery store, from the fear of heating my home to keeping my family warm, to buying my son's new sneakers." I know all about that, Madam Speaker. "It seems to be too much to bear. I am asking that you represent me and my family in Ottawa, a place that seems to have forgotten Albertans. Please fight to eliminate these unnecessary and ineffective taxes and to bring common sense back to Canada. Please fight to make Canada affordable again." I also received this email, Madam Speaker, from Ace in the beautiful community of Silverado in my riding. "Is the Liberal government aware of the housing crisis and the high cost of living that are facing Canadians? With the carbon tax and high interest rates, we can feel the impact. We are struggling day in and day out to make ends meet. Where is our Prime Minister who was cheering for the middle class? I have recently met more and more people who cannot afford housing, rent, and groceries. Wasn't this used to be a basic thing to afford if we have a job? As an Uber driver, I hear a lot of stories from all walks of life, good and bad. But lately, I have been hearing a lot of sad stories about people who cannot afford the cost of living anymore. I'm going to share a few with you. A young lady told me she was thinking of getting married and having kids, but now it is impossible for her dream to come true as homes and rentals are out of reach. I spoke with an oldish man in his 50s, oh, I hope that's not too old, Madam Speaker, who used to live in a nice townhouse in Calgary, but now lives in a one-room in a shared accommodation because his townhouse rent doubled and he could no longer afford it. Another story, I met a young lady who moved from BC to Calgary. She told me the rent was so expensive that she had to work as a part-time sex worker to pay the bills. Last but not least, I met a lot of young men and women who've moved back to their parents' basements because they cannot even afford rent. Are higher interest rates helping us to bring down inflation? The fact of the matter is that they are not. But all it does is bring down the middle class and make us poorer and poorer. I sometimes wonder whether our government in Ottawa is not aware of the citizens' issues, or if they just do not care. I quite frankly do not see any improvement to our lives. Life is getting more and more expensive, and poverty is a national epidemic. Who is fighting for us? In a nutshell, the high cost of living is destroying us. We need a proactive government that would do its best to help its fellow citizens. We are drowning in poverty. Please help. Madam Speaker, these are just some of the sad and desperate stories that I have received from my citizens in Calgary, Midnapore. And when I look at these actions of this government, I certainly see why this is the case. This government, Madam Speaker, is spending out of control and has an absolute obsession with outside consultants and passing on help and funding to their Liberal friends, and yet not to Canadians themselves. We need only look at the most recent supplementary estimates, which I had the opportunity to discuss with the President of the Treasury Board yesterday in Government Operations Committee. Planned spending in 2023-2024 has reached a record $21.6 billion. That's incredible, with $704 million in proposed spending on professional and special services. And this amount will likely increase with additional spending requests in subsequent supplementary estimates. In 2023-2024, the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat lapsed at the end of the fiscal year $500 million, but they indicated that of the $500 million, $350 million was for professional and special services. So even with the $350 million in consulting savings, the cost for consultants still increased by $3 billion. That is not even 1/6 of the $3 billion that was spent by this Liberal government and their obsession with consulting compared to the year before. Current estimates have the costs at higher than $1.2 billion, but lower than last fiscal year by $1.8 billion. It is highly likely to increase, however. As well, Madam Speaker, when the President of the Treasury Board was present yesterday at the Government Operations Committee, I pointed out the $39.8 billion deficit, which currently is in existence. In addition to the record amount being spent on consultants, as I had said before, as well as the $1.9 billion additional in interest in the supplementary estimates that apparently the Treasury Board President failed to remember during their last round of spending, and therefore, who knows how much this amount will be in the future. Another example of this out-of-control spending, Madam Speaker, with consultants is the hiring of the consulting firm KPMG to ironically find ways to have the government save money. But yet the two contracts for KPMG, one was valued at $325,000 and the second one valued at $344,650 for a total of $669,650, Madam Speaker. So this problem with this government is clearly that they are not listening to Canadians. But the good news is that Conservatives have a plan for a motion that we have forward that will allow families to have a little bit of joy this summer by getting rid of the GST on gasoline and diesel, eliminating the carbon tax, and the federal fuel tax just till Labor Day. This will save the average Canadian family $670.35 a litre. If this government could kindly give up their obsession with spending and consultants and support our motion, in addition to the other parties within the House, in addition to their NDP coalition members as well as their Bloc coalition members, this would be one gift for Canadians during their summer. And I certainly hope all members of this House will consider doing that. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, it's interesting. The members criticizing the government, saying that we're not listening. I'm listening to the member, and she's talking about all these, the needs that are there. We're bringing forward answers to many of those needs, whether it's the dental program that I referenced, I've referenced the pharmacare program. There's so many things, the disability plan. So many things that we're addressing in terms of the needs, and then she brings it to an end by saying, you know, well, we're just not listening and families will benefit by $670. That's just not true. Not only is she mislead, I don't know, Madam Speaker, can you intentionally mislead as blatant as that? The average Canadian is not going to benefit by $670. That's just wrong. It's not true. The members cannot substantiate it. Can she substantiate her statement that average Canadians will benefit by $670? If so, how?
Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to my colleague. I think the numbers that I just shared substantiate that in terms of the record levels of debt, the record levels of amounts being spent on consultants. I have said this time and time again in this House, Madam Speaker, and this government takes and takes and takes with one hand and gives a tiny little back with the other, tiny little scraps for so much they take. And this member is just trying to perpetuate that mistruth, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Commentaire, l'honorable député de Rivière.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille. Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I would just like to talk to my colleague. She said how bad the Liberal government is, and I would just like them to realize that they're adding an expense of $1.4 billion over 3 months. So here's the question. How can she ensure that if that spending was incurred, it would go to the underprivileged, because it is richer people who spend more money on gas? So I would just like to hear her thoughts on that. The Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, I know that the Bloc members never appreciate everything that Alberta has done for the natural resources sector and everything that Alberta has given to all of Canada. I think it's clear from the colleague's question. But as an Albertan, and like all my Conservative colleagues, will continue to work for all of Canada. And that includes Quebec, Madam Speaker. Not just Quebec, but all of Canada. And with that question, it is necessary to recognize that we always support all sectors in Canada, including natural resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I listened to the Honourable Member's speech, and I do agree that people are suffering in this country. However, she seems to, and the Conservatives seem to put it all upon this one carbon tax, and yet as governments consistently and consecutively, we legislate poverty. And I just want to take a bit of a statement from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, who talks about poverty, and they say in order to get through that, or to deal with poverty, we need to recognize the right to an adequate standard of living, help in terms of providing good health care, providing a universal basic income, ensuring that we meet needs like food insecurity, minimum wage, low-paid work, all of those things. Why is it that the Conservatives focus on this one thing instead of actually dealing with the problem in the first place? Thank you, Madam.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Very much to my honourable colleague who I enjoyed. I very much enjoyed her mother as well when she was in this House. The member talks about legislating poverty, and it's my belief that her and her party have been legislating poverty for the last 36 months and working hand in hand with this government. And she and her party always have a chance to make the choice to leave that agreement so that Canadians can have the opportunity to have a choice in how they'd like to see this nation go forward, where hopefully we can reduce this debt and this deficit deficit, where we can reduce this necessity, this obsession with outside consultants, and hopefully bring some ease to Canadians. But the first little step that her and her party can take is to support the motion that we are putting forward on Monday. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Resuming debate.